All right, welcome back to Mind Pump TV. I'm here again with our buddy, Dr. Jordan Shallow. I asked Jordan before he got started today, I said, hey, Jordan, we get a lot of questions about core exercises. I'd love to hear your take on that. What do you think your 3 best core exercises are? So he's gonna break down in this video, he's gonna go over his 3 favorite core exercises, why they are, and then how they carry over into powerlifting. So make sure you guys stay tuned in here, listen, make sure you guys like, comment below, and subscribe to the channel if this helps you out.
All right, guys, so the first core movement we're gonna go through is the hanging knee raise. Really popular, either done in like a Roman chair. We're gonna go full hanging in the overhead. Now, I wanna go through what poor form or maybe less effective form will look like first. So if the objective outcome is to raise the knees, that can happen one of 2 ways. So the first way I see it's gonna be a little less effective is when people are raising the knees, they're keeping somewhat of a lordotic curve in their lumbar spine and they're just flexing the hips. Now, the reason this is a little ineffective is we want those knees to rise as a consequence of our pelvis tilting underneath. That posterior tilt is gonna be an action of the rectus abdominis. If we're just bringing the knees up, like I showed there, from just flexing the hips, we're using the hip flexors, the psoas, which actually calls on drawing that lumbar spine forward, which is actually the opposite of the movement we're trying to cue, which is gonna tuck that rib cage down, pull that pelvis underneath. So the less effective way is here. Then the more effective way is going to be getting those knees high from the pelvis, tucking underneath. So it'll look a little bit like this. Kind of use the serratus to push back. And then as you bring the knees up, pelvis tucks underneath. Now, a lot of people get worried about the lumbar spine going into flexion. It's like, well, you got to remember that we are in an extended spine curve to start. So we're afforded a good amount of spinal flexion before our spine is in a flexed position. And even so, we're having a distraction force, not an axial compression force, which is to say, we're hanging, we don't have a weight on our back. I definitely wouldn't recommend squatting in that lumbar flex position, but with the distraction force of the parameters or the loading parameters of the actual workout or the exercise, wouldn't have to worry too much about putting your low back into flexion when trying to train that muscle action of the rectus abdominis as you posteriorly tilt the pelvis. All right, so second movement is going to be a side plank reach through. Now, the whole idea of this is we don't want to actually cue or move rotation through the actual spine itself. We want to sort of put a moment of rotation, sort of impose demand of rotation on the lumbar spine and have the muscles that are meant to resist that, resist the movement. So the whole idea is to have the spine not move at all. We're just having the imposed demand come from it through a different plane than the first movement, where the first one we were going through more of a flexion extension plane. This is going to be more of a lateral flexion rotation. So really kind of encompass all movements of rigidity or resisted movements of rigidity that are going to be imposed on the spine, which are going to force our core to sort of be active. So sort of assume a side plank position. Now what you're going to do, I like to put the top foot over, externally rotate that top shoulder. Now as we're going to do is we're going to reach through. But as we reach through, we're trying to move the shoulders and hips simultaneously, right? We're not trying to rotate through the spine. We're actually just trying to move the spine as one and resist that rotation and lateral flexion the entire time. That's why the stacked foot position helps. It allows you to turn the hips with the shoulders a little bit further. And then we're using internal, external obliques, transverse abdominis, and the rectus to stay rigid throughout the spine as we impose that rotational demand on the lumbar spine. So third and final movement that I like as far as building that midline strength for powerlifting is going to be a permutation of an ab wheel rollout. So what we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves a foam roller, med ball, something that we can exert force kind of through our adductors. That's the thing, core people just think abs, right? Basically everything from the bottom of the pelvic floor into the pelvis, up into the lats to stabilize the shoulder. Core can be a lot more all-encompassing term, especially when it comes to powerlifting and how dynamic the movements are. So we're gonna squeeze the roller in between the knees. What I see a lot of is allowing that lumbar spine to go into hyperextension. So from the get-go, think like almost like hollowing the lats or flaring the lats to keep that rib cage in position the entire time. Basically, this is like a dynamic plank. When we're planking, we're trying to just resist that extension moment. Now, all we're doing with the roller is we're shifting our combined center of mass or combined center of gravity further away and still trying to resist that extension moment of the lower back. So we're gonna squeeze the knees together against the roller. We're gonna kind of like hollow that upper back. And we're gonna squeeze the knees. And I mean, you can vary it through like rotational planes, so we can take this out to the side, open it up, same thing. Because we got to think how we actually use our core when we're training. When we're squatting, when we're deadlifting, we're using the core to resist movements, to be stable, not to be strong, not to exert force, but rather to resist force. So loading up different parameters that are gonna put a demand of movement that we're gonna have to resist rather than exerting force the entire time and then trying to actually move our spine around. Because when we're lifting, we don't want our spine to move at all. We want it to be an equal transfer of force, or as close to an equal transfer of force from our feet into the bar. So there you have it. We did hanging knee raises, side plank reach throughs, and we did the ab wheel variation with the adductor activation on the roller. So those are my three favorite movements when it comes to core activation, building midline strength for powerlifting.